Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And good morning to folks in Cafe Church and in Hollywood and watching on the internet. Good morning to you as well. I've been coming here, I don't know, for about 200 years. And a strange, weird thing happened to me this morning. I got up, and that's not strange and weird. But I got up, and I thought, what would I say to you if this was the last time I got to see you? And some of you looking at me like, what's going on? You know, I'm not planning on dying or anything, but I mean, eventually, the statistics on death are pretty impressive. But I thought, what would I, because sometimes we don't say things because we think we've got forever to say them. And I thought, what would I say? And I just wanted to say, and I trek around the world. I was just thinking I've probably spoken in at least 1,000 churches personally. And I would just want to say to you that CFC, to me, there is a beauty, there's a poignancy about this church. You're not perfect. I mean, look who comes along. You're not perfect, but there's a beauty here that is rare and arresting and unusual. And it really has been a privilege to be part of that. I've had an exciting week. Call me superficial, but we bought a new TV this week. Yes, I know, not terribly much of a spiritual breakthrough, really, but we bought a new TV. And when we were in the store, I said to the assistant, the 9-year-old, I said, I said, are these things easy to set up? And he said, sir, any idiot could set this up. I'm going to hunt that boy down. Because 2 hours of muttering, and finally, eventually, I got this thing set up. And I'm really excited about it because it's got a motion sensor. And it's kind of an environmentally friendly thing, as well as a technical thing. This TV is really intelligent because if it senses no movement in the room, after 15 minutes, it will turn itself off. You don't want it on all the time because if you do that, eventually you'll burn the screen out. You do not want it on all the time. And as we've been thinking about rhythms of grace, this is the last in the series, that's our problem. We are on all the time. We are on immediately connectable through our phones, through email, through text. We are endlessly distracted. Rather than thinking about something important, we can go on Facebook and find out what our friends have eaten for breakfast this morning. We are on. And then we've got this series talking about rhythms of grace, really practical, really helpful. So let's think about that today. 2 readings, please. First from Luke chapter 10, a very famous story of Jesus having lunch with 2 ladies, Martha and Mary, and then some words from Jesus. Luke 10, verse 38. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught, but Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. But the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you are worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary's discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. And then some words from Jesus, a winsome invitation in Matthew chapter 11. This is the message version. Jesus says, you tired, worn out, burned out on religion, come to me, get away with me, you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Over the years of coming to CFC, I have shared many experiences of embarrassment in my own life. There is no shortage of illustrations that I can bring. Sometimes I feel like a Mr. Bean of the Christian world, stumbling from one moment of ineptitude to another for the general entertainment of the Christian public. I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, part of Timberline Church there. It's a city of 140,000, not Bible Belt. About 1 in every 11 people who lives in the city comes to our church. What that means is if Kay and I go shopping or go to the shopping mall or anything, we're going to bump into people from Timberline. And I'm used to that now, and it's really fun most of the time. Some while ago, I walked into a restaurant. Kay wasn't with me. There was a table of 8 over there. And as I walked in, they spotted me and they waved at me and summoned me over. And so I immediately thought, Timberline people, I'll go and say hello. So I wandered over to their table, stood at the, hi guys, how you doing? They said, fine. How are you? And I said, I'm good. I just got back from the UK and I'm blathering on. And you know those moments when you just don't know why, but you just sense a bit of discomfort. And I blathered on for 4 or 5 minutes, and I can see as I'm looking around the table just a sense of agitation developing. And so after about 5 minutes of mindless meandering, I said, can I just ask, you don't know me, do you? They said, we've never seen you before in our lives. I said, but when I walked in, you called me over, you waved. They said, it was the guy behind you. I said, I'm going to go away now forever. It was a moment of acute embarrassment and tension at the table. This story of Martha and Mary is about a moment of acute embarrassment and tension around the table. It's really awkward because there were certain homes that Jesus loved to be in. Martha and Mary lived in Bethany with their brother Lazarus, and he enjoyed being with them, and all's going really well until embarrassment breaks out. Martha is frantically multitasking, feet to wash as was the custom, conversation to be had, food to be cooked. The text says that she was distracted. The Greek word means to be pulled away or dragged away. And Jesus offers a diagnosis in this moment of tension. I can imagine her banging the pots and pans around in the kitchen to send signals and huffing and puffing and making horsey noises, that kind of thing. And Jesus says, you're worried and upset. One translation says it like this, your head is killing you. She's distracted, she's worried, and she's upset, and so are we. We're busy. We know that. Stephen Covey, in his book, First Things First, he says people expect us to be busy. Overworked has become a status symbol in our society. If we're busy, we're important. If we're not busy, we're embarrassed to admit it. Busyness is where we get our security. It's validating, popular, and pleasing. It's also a good excuse for not dealing with the first things in our lives. Ouch. That really hit me when I read it a few weeks ago. Anne spoke in her message about strength, and Anne said one of the challenges of preaching is that you have to live it. That's one of the challenges for me of this. I've been agitated about whether I should say what I'm about to say, but I'm going to just go for it. I've had a rotten month. I deliberately took August as a time not to preach. This is the first time I preached in 5 weeks. I was so looking forward to it. And then the English summer hit. And about 20 years ago, I spent a year in clinical depression. And I want to just be honest with you. This is not a pity party. I just want to be honest, okay? I got a little worried about myself a couple of weeks ago. I thought, I'm tiptoeing towards the edge of depression again. And I'm like, what is going on? And I suddenly realized that I don't do well with inactivity, that busyness is a buttress that can hold out troubling thoughts, anxieties, and worries. All the time I'm busy, I don't have to think about those things. But when I have to stop, oh my goodness, the walls start to fold in and I have to think. I have to emotionally prepare to go on holiday. Drives my family crazy because the inactivity creates a vacuum that can potentially be challenging. And when I read Covey's words, it's a good excuse for not dealing with the first things in our lives. I thought, wow, that's me. So if nobody else responds this morning, I'm going to. Not only are we busy, but we're fragmented emotionally. We're cluttered souls, to use one preacher's statement. Ronald Rolhauser said, "It's no easy task to walk this earth and find peace. Inside of us, it would seem something is at odds with the very rhythm of things. We're forever restless, dissatisfied, frustrated, and aching. We're so overcharged with desire that it's hard to come to simple rest. And our brains are busier." Glenn Wilson, who's a visiting professor of psychology at Gresham College in London, calls it infomania. And we've also got FOMO. You know what FOMO is? Fear of missing out. What happens if I don't get on Twitter? I might miss that picture of that bacon sandwich. We used to have phones that enabled us to do this. Do you remember when phones were designed so that you could call someone? It's a novel idea. Now your phone is like a Swiss Army knife. Dictionary, calculator, web browser, email, Game Boy, appointment calendar, voice recorder, guitar tuner, weather forecaster, GPS, texter, tweeter, Facebook updater, flashlight. And we're multitasking. According to a 2012 survey, 47% of tablet, like iPad users, over the age of 13 visit social networking while watching TV. 61% of us check our email while watching TV. And we text while we're walking down the street. We catch up on email while we're standing in a queue. While we're having lunch with friends, we're Facebooking other people who are having lunch with friends. Tell you how you notice it. Watch a movie from the 80s, quite apart from the appalling fashions when a fashion demon roamed the earth. Notice that people are walking down the street looking around. It's incredible. Now go into the centre of Belfast, walk out there, go to London, and you'll see everybody walking around robotically like this. But there's a fly in the ointment of it all, because you see, this multitasking is a diabolical illusion. Earl Miller, who's a neuroscientist, one of the world's experts on the way our wires are brained, he said, we're not wired to multitask well. When people think they're multitasking, they're actually switching from one task to another very rapidly, and every time they do so, there's a cognitive cost in doing that. We think we're keeping lots of balls in the air, where in fact, cognitively, what we're doing is running around between spinning plates, feeling a slight sense of panic that one of the plates is going to fall. According to a study of the University of Sussex, constant multitasking actually damages your brain. It affects the regions of the brain responsible for empathy, cognitive control, and emotional control, and can reduce your productivity by 40%. And I've noticed that. Have you noticed how on edge we are? How cluttered we are, how quickly irritated we are. What's his name? Gary Lineker. Gary Lineker got into trouble this week because he made a comment about baldness during a program, and bald people everywhere, or at least 2 or 3, rose up in protest and were offended. And I say that as a man who has a hairstyle that looks like a shrinking peninsula. A couple of days ago, a TV host on ABC News in America made a passing comment about Prince George liking ballet and said, I don't think that will last too long. And people who love ballet everywhere rose up and were offended. Isn't it weird? We have a verbosity like never before, and we have a fragility like never before. But I think Northern Ireland needs to rise up and send the world a message in 3 words. Catch yourself on. And I found this in my own life. Here we go, confession again. You know those 5-item lanes in the supermarket? 10-item express lanes, where good, godly people who have less than 10 items go with their basket. I'm in one of those 5 or 10-item lanes. It was a 10-item lane. And I'm standing there texting. And I noticed that the man, who's surely a son of Satan, the man in front of me has got 11 items in his basket. I know this not by revelation. I've counted. 11 items, 22 if you count the dozen eggs singly. And I'm standing there like, execute this man! And I'm like, what's the matter with you? We're running around on edge, on the brink of being offended, verbose yet fragile. So what can we do? A few things from this passage. First of all, let's realize, we're called to abundant living. We've got it wrong. We're called to abundant living. Jesus says, John 10, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I've come that they might have life and have it to the full. I've got used to saying, when people ask me how I am, I've discovered something about myself. Grief, there's a lot of self-disclosure here today. Some of you are going to go away and say, that boy really needs help. If you ask me how I am, I've got a way I normally respond. I say, I'm tired. I'm tired. Ask me how I am. I'm tired. I told you. I had a holiday recently. I came back. I felt really refreshed. A friend said to me, how are you doing? I said, I'm tired. Then I thought, no, I'm not. You see, we get used to a pattern of things, and we're invited to live in the rhythm and purposes of God. This story is not just about a woman refusing to help out. First of all, it's really radical because it's a woman assuming a place of learning. She's sitting at the Lord's feet. Notice the language there. The Apostle Paul, when he was Saul, he sat at the feet of Gamaliel. A woman could be taught the Torah, the law, in Jesus' day, but she would never be allowed to sit at the feet of a rabbi. That was unthinkable. This was radical. This was a woman breaking out of the restrictive stereotype. And she's living in a way that's arresting and unusual. You see, if we don't do that, we don't live abundant life, we live resentment life. Mary's smoldered. She's angry at Mary. Mary's angry at Martha because she's not helping. She's critical. She's judgmental. Someone has said, tension and frustrations mount when we're performing the wrong task and trying to cram too many of the right activities into a given period. We live resentfully. And then when we don't live this abundant life of rhythm, we miss out on life. Recently, I was in a bathroom. Christian leaders use the bathroom. Just wanted to clarify that. I was in a bathroom once in a church. A bloke came in, recognized me, said, hello, Jeff. Surprised to see you in here. I thought, what do you think we do? Pray about it? You know, it's really odd. And for about 5 minutes after going to the bathroom, I washed my hands, always a good idea. Should be something about that in the Bible. And I stood for 5 minutes in a worshipful position beneath the hot air dryer, only to discover that it was an empty paper towel dispenser. People are walking by me going, why is he worshipping the towel dispenser? Are we willing Are we willing to take a look at whether we're living the abundant life? Jesus is in the final months of his ministry, and Mary missed this moment. Secondly, it's time to take responsibility for our time. It's time to take responsibility for our time. Be very careful, Ephesians 5. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. It's time to take responsibility. I fly a lot. That's why I look like I do. I'm only 27. But all this flying, and I was on an 11-hour flight with a child that screamed continuously. And I, as a parent and as a grandparent, I feel great sympathy now. At least I did for the first 3 hours. Because it can be really hard. I mean, if this ever happens to you, be kind to the parents, because what are they supposed to do? Their child's upset and agitated, and people are tutting all around them, which is not kind. But this did go on for hours and hours and hours, and they kept going, shh, 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 shh. And it was lovely, because in the end, this little girl, she suddenly said, "It's no good! I just can't be quiet!" And I think we can do that. I can't slow down. I can't live differently. The Bible calls us to take responsibility, but it's hard. Eugene Peterson said the kingdom of self is heavily defended territory. And we live under our schedule. We feel powerless to change anything. We hide behind our schedule. So let's do a few things. Let's embrace techno solitude. Turn some things off. Turn your phone off so that the Pavlovian beep doesn't distract you. Turn off the browser notifications. Turn off email notifications. Build technology breaks for at least 1 to 3 hours. I'm not talking 5 minutes. And don't do the phone thing in the morning or in the evening, particularly before going to bed. The screen stuff, I'm not going to bore you with the details. It won't help your sleeping. I caught myself waking up in the middle of the night checking my email at 3 o'clock in the morning. We often say, don't just stand there, do something. I want to say, don't just do something, stand there. And if we don't, there's going to be consequences. Wayne Muller said, if we do not allow for a rhythm of rest in our overly busy lives, illness becomes our Sabbath. Our pneumonia, our cancer, our heart attack creates Sabbaths for us. Are we willing to take responsibility? Thirdly, let's remember that we've given our lives to Jesus. Our lives to Jesus. Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways. He'll direct your paths. This is about intentional living through the whole of our lives. Listen to what James says in James 4. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What's your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogant schemes. All such boasting is evil. I gave my life to Jesus at 17. I am now 63. Here's what's bothering me. I'm a little worried that slowly, gradually, unconsciously, incrementally, having given my life to Jesus, I might have taken it back. When I was wrestling with the demonic TV, I discovered that I could restore it to factory default settings. What a beautiful thing. What are factory default settings? Basically, you set it, unless you change it, it's set that way, for good. I want a factory default setting for me. I want to be able to go, you will love broccoli for the rest of your days. You will wake up every morning and say, yes, I want to run 4 miles today, and I'm just ecstatic about it. I want a factory default that says I won't get bothered in the supermarket when that man's got 11 items, 22 if you count the eggs. But no such factory default setting exists. What does that mean? It means this thing has to be done daily. We're told to take daily worries on board, because we don't know what tomorrow will bring, says Jesus. We're told to ask for daily bread. It seems to me, therefore, that we are being told to live incrementally, intentionally, and yesterday's choices and commitments won't wash. Have we given our lives to Jesus and gradually taken them back? Do we need to intentionally adjust the settings each day? Number four, know how to say yes, no, or not now. Jesus knew how to say no. Lazarus was ill, John 11. Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. People didn't like that. He was flexible. There are some people who say no and they're not flexible and won't do anything once they've said no. Jesus says to his disciples, come apart and rest for a while. And the plan is abandoned because a need is presented, Mark chapter 6. But do we know how to say no? Or some of us, we so love to please that we don't have a capacity to say, I can't do that. Some of us need to learn how to sit. It's been said that sitting without serving is powerless. Serving without sitting is directionless. We're just rushing around. By the way, you can end up giving to Jesus what Jesus doesn't want. He didn't want a big meal. Serving after sitting produces power and balance. And sitting after serving can be so fulfilling. Did you know that in Jewish thinking, the 7th day was known as the Menuha? The Menuha is where you've done your work for 6 days, and on the 7th day, you don't just sit back in inactivity, but you sit back and celebrate the goodness of the work that has been done. Menuha. Some of us need to know how to say no, or yes, or not now. I've been trying this one recently in my own life. I discovered this prayer in a New Zealand prayer book. It goes like this. It is night after a long day. What has been done has been done. What has not been done has not been done. Let it be. Number five, experience the power of loving rebuke. Experience the power of loving rebuke. The Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details. There's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. Jesus is not having a go. When he says Martha's name, he says it twice. Martha, Martha. In Jewish culture, that's a way of expressing endearment. Owen, Owen. There's not a statement in that culture of exasperation, but endearment and friendship. Martha, Martha. And he's saying to her, look, you got it wrong. Can I just ask this before I move on to my last point here? Do we have the capacity to think we might be doing it pretty much wrong? Last week, Paul Reed gave one of the best messages on the kingdom that I've ever heard. You say, how do you know? You weren't here. Internet. And they almost all of them got it wrong. The Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Essenes, the Zealots, Paul pointed out, they were all convinced of their rightness, but they were all doing it wrong. What about us? Or are we Christians are pretty convinced of our own rightness? And who can tell you the truth about you? Who do you invite in to say, how am I doing with my schedule, with my use of my phone, with my busyness? Who can tell you the truth without the deafening sound of eggshells cracking, appearing? Well, the last thing is this, and that is establish the disruptive priority of church. See, this is about solitude and being alone, but it is about being together as well to maintain the rhythm of grace. Jesus went to Nazareth where he'd been brought up. On the Sabbath day, he went into the synagogue as was his custom. He stood up to read. When you study the Old Testament, you study that they had all of these feasts and festivals that were so absolutely disruptive and got in the way of everything, but they were priority. And it sounds a little bit old-fashioned, forgive me. But I want to just say the local church is really important, and showing up matters too. People say, well, I'll be there in spirit. Well, do us a favor, bring your body too. And it's not just about us. Richard Gardner said 2 weeks ago, your church needs you, was the message. He said, everyone has a gift to give. And let's face it. Let's face it. We don't always feel like it. Okay, I know I'm going to, after lunch, I'm going to go back to my room and I'm going to say to myself, self, why did you tell them what you told them about yourself today? Because vulnerability can sound self-indulgent and it can feel like you're exposing a wound. But I just want you to hear me, because one of the things I love about CFC is its authenticity. So I didn't want to come here today. I wanted to see you. I wanted to see Owen and the team, and we're going to spend Monday together talking about all that's going on and planning and thinking and strategizing about the future. Yeah, I want that. But I said to Jesus this morning, Lord, you know that I've had a rough month. Prayer is interesting, isn't it? Because we're continuously telling God what he already knows, giving him an update as if he was unaware. And therefore, it feels a bit weird to be standing up talking about this. But sometimes it's not about what you feel. It's about what's right. Heard of a young man who had a knock on his bedroom door. It's his mum. She said, get up, son, it's time for church. He said, oh, Mum, I don't want to go to church today. She said, look, you need to go. Why don't you want to go? He said, well, I'm bored with the sermons, I don't like the worship, I'm weary, and besides, those people at the church, they don't even like me. Give me one reason to go, Mum. She said, well, son, you are the pastor. Make this a priority, not an addendum. Not legalistically. When I became a Christian, if we didn't show up at church 4 times a week, there was a high likelihood that God was going to kill us. It's not that. But make being together a priority. Why don't we have the worship team come back, because that will give you hope. I felt so relaxed this morning. You probably noticed that. As they help me and just play something quietly in the background here, you ever wonder what happened to Martha? Mary, celebrated. And by the way, I think earlier in the message I got my Marthas and my Marys a bit mixed up. If you noticed that, don't write in, I know. I mean, why did they have to both begin with M? Why couldn't it have been Martha and Brenda? Well, that would have been helpful to preachers everywhere, wouldn't it? See, the danger is, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, whatever you call yourselves, the danger is we can write Martha off as this fussy person. Mary's chosen the right thing, and she's sitting at the feet of Jesus, probably looking a bit happy with herself. What happened to Martha? Did she change? There are 2 great confessions of Christ in the New Testament. One famously comes from Peter, Matthew 16:16. And the other comes from Martha. It is this pot-clanging, irritated, frustrated, angry, God help me lady. It's her who in John 11:21 or thereabouts, she says, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who was to come into the world. The two great theological affirmations of the identity of Christ. One from Peter, and if I may say so in the Greek, woohoo! The other from Martha. Somehow she enabled revelation to seep into her soul and was able to make a declaration. I suggest that must have meant some changes. Let's leave the last word to Jesus. Always a good idea. I'll read it again. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me. You'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me. And you'll learn how to live freely and lightly. Would you stand with me if you're able for a moment, please? What I'm about to do, I've done here before in a different context. I'm going to do it again in this context. Just look at me if you would, because this is the moment congregations tend to fear. It's like the response time. Tension begins to creep in. Oh no, what will we be required to do? Raise a hand, come to the front, light a candle, make an origami pattern. If you're weary, and in a sense, most of us could respond to this, but listen carefully, please. If you're weary and you're conscious today that you urgently need Jesus to teach you this week about these rhythms of grace, but primarily, right now, you're just worn out. Here's what I want to ask you to do. I want to ask you to do absolutely nothing. Nothing. You say, there's got to be a catch somewhere. If you're a bit worn out and weary, I'd like to invite you right where you're standing to do absolutely nothing, but just quietly sit down. Just take the weight off your feet. Go on, if you'd like. Not everybody will do this or needs to. But just sit down. If you want to become a follower of Jesus and sit at his feet, why don't you just sit down where you are? Make that your response. Maybe your first time here today and you're saying, I don't understand all this stuff, but I want to know this Jesus. I don't want religion, but I want Jesus. If that's true, you just quietly sit down where you are as well. Let me tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to pray. And then we're going to sing a song which I've asked that we sing because there's something visceral about it. Newcomers can identify with it. People who've been around CFC for a long time can identify with it. It's visceral. And when we sing this song, I'm going to invite you just to assume the posture of your choice. Please listen carefully. When we sing this song, if you want to stay seated, just stay seated. If you want to stand, stand. if you want to kneel, and some of us will, especially in reflection or in response to this idea of not taking our lives back, the lives we've given to Jesus. There are some people here who will want to kneel. I invite you to do that. So we're going to pray, then we're going to sing. Jesus, thank you that you're willing to teach us. You're willing to take us on board. In a world that does crazy and frantic almost naturally, we'd like to live differently, and we need you to teach us. We need you, Holy Spirit, to form in us hearts that are generally attuned to rhythms of grace. We thank you for all that's been shared during this great series. And we pray that whatever you're saying to us, whatever we need to change because we got it wrong, establish new and healthy patterns in us. And do it this week, Lord. Help us not to run away having looked in the mirror, as James says. And we've seen our reflection, then we rush away and bury ourselves in productivity. Help us not to take our lives back into our own hands, having given them to you. Before we sing, take a few seconds to say to Jesus what you'd like to say to Jesus.